with no further ado, let's get started. I'm Doug, and thank you all for joining this IGEL community webinar. We're really looking forward to this webinar. A lot of times we do, or all times, we do events where we bring in techies and we talk some tech and show some IGEL, maybe do a Q&A. Today's a little bit different. We have Login VSI on the line with us, and we're going to talk about Login VSI and all the great things they're doing with the EUC space and beyond, and then how that relates to IGEL too. So I'm really excited to have Michael Kent with us. He's the CTO over at Login VSI. And of course, we have, the one and only Sebastien. And these guys are the ones to be talking. Nobody wants to hear me longer than I'm talking now. So they're the true experts, and we'll get into this. So with no further ado, I'll just turn this thing over to Sebastien. And if you guys, one more thing, if you have questions, please use the questions, the Q&A piece down at the bottom of your screen there. Try not to put them in chat, because we might miss them. I will be monitoring that, but put them in the Q&A piece, and these guys will definitely answer your questions. So we have, two experts. Michael's as bright as they come. So I think you'll really enjoy that, and all the knowledge he has, and you can ask him anything. So, okay, I'm done talking. Sebastien, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I mean, we already discussed a lot of things regarding our ecosystem. We had already calls with IGEL Ready and which new partners were enrolled in our IGEL Ready program. But Login VSI is one of the most amazing products I have seen in the last 1 to 2 years, I must say. And if I'm thinking back, and that's something I already wrote back to Michael, if I'm thinking back into my old companies, I don't know how many times we were searching for such kind of solution, and we script a lot of things. We did a lot with macro recording. So I was working for a German bookstore, and we had to monitor how performant our stock option and stock challenging system is. And based on Citrix, based on NDP, we had different kind of connections. And honestly, we didn't have a real proper working solution. It was more fiddling around and trying to find a solution. So basically, I had the chance to play around and to test the solution in my lab. Thank you again for that, Michael. And what came out of this is a couple of use cases we will try to cover together with Michael, looking on the product itself, but also on the product integrated into the IGEL ecosystem. Because if you look at about an application, virtualization, desktop infrastructure, you might have performance issues, but the bottleneck is pretty hard to find, especially if you think about, and I will try to use the P word instead of saying pandemic, because I will try to avoid that term for the next hour, is to find out how the teleworker situation is evolving, how many person can work in parallel, even users complaining that something is not working like expected. Is it on the back end? Is it on the endpoint side? And there we already covered a lot of different use cases in our solution by scripting. And our goal today is to show what can be scripted, but to show again, it's a one-shot thing. You have no historical view. You have no report out of it. You have no sizing recommendation, etc. And that's the perfect handover to the solution that Michael is presenting today. So I'm really excited. And I will also have a look on the question and answer section and into the chat. So if there is something that you need or you want to get discussed and you didn't have the chance to ask in that section, please just write us a Slack message. If you didn't join the IGEL community already, please join us on igelcommunity.com, and we'll be happy to forward then your question to Michael. So, Michael, after that, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you all, and welcome. We structured this webinar there's a couple of intro slides just to give you some context. Then we're going to dive into some use cases. Of course, keep the questions coming. Sebastien will monitor for those questions. In terms of background, my name is Michael Kent. I'm the CTO for Login VSI. I've been kicking around testing probably since 2000, so 20-ish years. I worked for a testing company, Mercury Interactive, prior to their acquisition by HP and then Micro Focus. So testing is a passion of mine. It's probably where I cut my teeth, if so to speak. Grew up in testing, and so I have a passion for it, and I can really geek out on it. So if you have testing questions, how you would tackle certain things, how it applies to larger ecosystems. I'm pretty good at being able to contextualize what you're going to see here in terms of general IT operations. Again, I've been doing this for 3 decades. So you know what it is. It's the patterns, right? What's old is new again. So we see it come around now for the 3rd time, and it has a familiar form and factor. So if you have questions, even outside of just what the product can do, I'm happy to take a shot at it. So again, I'll start with sharing my screen in just a few slides and just provide some context. All right. So what really Login VSI is we're a testing platform. And the idea is to be able to take changes, application changes, infrastructure changes, configuration changes, and give VDI managers, infrastructure owners, INO leaders a way to do their testing, which is more focused on what they need to know, right? This handoff between a developer and unit test and the real life, how is it going to impact my user? How is it going to impact my environment? And how can you help me keep up with all of the changes that now all of my agile developers are throwing over their side of the wall? We know that everyone's DevOps and everyone's perfect. But I think if you ask 10 people, what does DevOps mean? You'll get 10 different answers, somewhere in the neighborhood of, huh? Or, oh, it's this framework that makes infrastructure people work like developers. And you're going to get everything in between as well. What we know today is DevOps still doesn't have the adoption in infrastructure as everyone expected. And so you have developers churning out software updates. Microsoft released 1,200 updates last year. They're on pace for 2,000 this year. Windows 11, they said there'd never be another one. It's already been leaked. Office changes, mostly security changes. All of your applications, your EMR systems are changing 4 to 6 times a year. Zoom changes on a weekly basis, et cetera. And all this change comes in and bottlenecks right at how do we safely get these through change control and implemented, et cetera. We have to challenge ourselves. We have a tool that we think addresses that challenge, and that's what we're here to show you today. I'm going to use some terms, and I just want you to understand what we're talking about. The platform deploys as a virtual appliance, and this is the brain. It's really passive. You use a web UI to configure what you want to happen, and then different components that have been deployed check in with this virtual appliance, pull their work, and do their job. Okay, it is a Linux-based appliance with a web UI, so you never have to worry about the Linux side. We have this concept of a launcher. And so this is your virtual appliance. Your launcher checks into the virtual appliance, and the launcher has the different client applications on it, Horizon View, et cetera, just like IGEL. We actually have partnered with IGEL to put a launcher on the IGEL OS, and I'll show you what that looks like here as part of this. That means that where you have your fleet of IGEL endpoints deployed, you have launchers deployed. You're halfway there. And this can benefit you in a few ways that we'll look at when we look at the use cases. The launcher is responsible to start the session, time the session, and generate the load. You'll hear us talk about a target environment. This is typically a VDI environment, Citrix. We support Citrix, we support Horizon. We support Workspace ONE. I have Microsoft uses us for WVD testing today, both the WVD team, Peter, as well as the internal Microsoft IT uses us to ensure that the V- contractors for Microsoft are up and functioning properly. And then finally, we'll talk about this concept of an application workload. And anyone here at Login VSI tends to use those interchangeably. They'll say application, they mean application workload. They'll say workload, they mean application workload. So you'll see that. These are the steps that we're going to automate inside the user session to drive an application, to do a task, if you will. So with that background, we'll go ahead and get into some of the use cases we're going to talk about today. In speaking with Sebastien, one of the things that we thought would be interesting is being able to really help determine real working performance of critical business applications in this work from home environment that we've been put into. So we'll talk about that. Lost my screen, sorry about that. I'm only great with most technology. Yeah. PowerPoint, we leave to sales.
All good, all good.
So IGEL endpoint is deployed. We configure it as a launcher, and it will go back in towards your business applications. The best part is that as long as the connectivity exists, then we're driving that through an IGEL endpoint that is sitting in a remote office or in your home office. As we'll show you here today, my system is running, my IGEL endpoint is running on my laptop in a virtual session at home to do testing against something that's in the cloud. And we'll go through that, and feel free to ask questions about what that is and why we did it that way. We also are going to talk a little bit about this Office Collaboration Suite and sizing. I'll show you what we can do. I think it's a great use case. I actually just ran this use case for Big 3 Consulting for a DR in the cloud. There's Citrix on-prem. They wanted critical business unit, their executive assistants, to be able to DR into WVD. And we ran a whole sizing. I have the report. We can look at what that report looks like. I've taken out their name to protect the innocent, but you can see what you can do with this product to answer some of these questions. Again, the benefit that IGEL customers have is that they have a fleet of these launchers already deployed, ready to be used, ready to be configured. And through the UMS, it's very easy to do that configuration and drop it onto your environment. So definitely excited about what that can mean for existing IGEL endpoints that are out already deployed in your environment. And then finally, I wanted to touch on healthcare. Our big 3 verticals here at Login VSI, we see a lot of healthcare, a lot of banking, and a lot of insurance, believe it or not. And a lot of these are high compliance environments, or they're VDI dense environments. And because of that, we play well. The history of Login VSI is we came from Citrix Consultancy. We were Citrix consultants, and so we started with a VDI. There are use cases outside of VDI for this product, and we can talk about those if you're interested toward the end. But this last one is, I have just a simple test of a MRS system, and the idea is to show you this concept of persona-based testing and how it can help you answer questions without having to do a lot of data translation. And so we'll go into that as well. So if there aren't any questions before we get started, I will start walking through the environment and the remote working use case. Sebastien, how are we looking?
I'm just looking at one question that came in a couple of seconds ago. So it's a discussion with James regarding Login VSI and ControlUp.
Sure.
And I hope that I answered the question correct, because I didn't want to interrupt your flow. So the question was on terms of scripting and IGEL. Is ControlUp and its triggering script execute? What's the panel view? So my short answer was tough question. Let me answer it briefly here. Both solutions are great, and I would see them as complementary. CU is more a live monitoring system, where LVSI is more a testing, sizing, and benchmarking tool. Just my view.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. If you've seen ControlUp, you can look at what we do, and you can make a decision on. So Login VSI is 3 capabilities. It's acceptance testing, pre-production, load testing, pre-production, and the very same test that you wrote to do your application testing, you use to do your load testing, and you use to do your monitoring in production. The exact same test. Probably the key difference is we just go deeper. So I don't just log in and time your login. I actually time your login. I open an application. I run through workflow steps inside that application, open Excel file, type in some spreadsheet data, save it, export it, save it as a PDF, send it to Mary in accounting, all of those steps inside the application, Login VSI can measure and give you a success and a performance criteria on. And this is not something that real user monitor tools can do today.
Mhm.
We'll see where they get in a year. But as it is today, we just go deeper into the application. So that's one difference. And the other key difference is we have pre-production and production use cases. We really would like to convince you that testing is cheaper and more cost-effective and saves you a lot of gray hair than waiting for something to happen in production and having a wonderful tool tell you something just happened. We want to know something's going to happen, not something just happened, right? Less RCA and more predictive impact analysis. So hopefully that helps James answer that and frame it. We do have a complimentary white paper with control up if anyone's interested.
I get the question is a little bit different from what I understood it. So there came a second question from him. Thanks, Sebastien. Big fan of Login VSI. So kudos to Michael. Just saw a slick data on Control Up and its integration with IGEL. Was wondering thoughts on its scripting features with IGEL. Oh. I would say, James, if you wouldn't mind that we take over that discussion maybe afterwards, because it's maybe more a control up discussion than a Login VSI one. So I will try to contact you separately. If you wouldn't mind just to PM me your Slack data, and I will contact you separately.
Yeah. Thank you. So I have just our endpoint running. I went through Sebastien and Doug's fantastic quick start to get this up and running. So I have UMS, I have a gateway, and this is running on my computer with no VPN. And so with that being said, I have my endpoint running, and this is our launcher running inside the IGEL endpoint. I can just as easily have something else working. That launcher is sitting in the background. It will create another session. This is just an example of IGEL's WVD connector. I'll go ahead and log into a workspace just to kind of show you that you get this dual use out of these endpoints that is makes it very amenable to doing this kind of testing with this infrastructure deployed. Additionally, I have my Login Enterprise appliance deployed. This deploys as a virtual appliance. It's 4 gigs of RAM, 2 CPU. You can scale it up if you want, but because it's mostly passive, it has a pretty small footprint. It does have an internal database. You can, of course, connect it to an external Microsoft SQL database if you wish. That being said, I'll give you a quick tour of this interface, and then we'll look at these use cases. We have a dashboard view that kind of shows you what's going on when it's happening. You'll see that I have a couple of use cases built specifically for this demo. I can look at the individual results, whether it's an application test, what we would call the continuous test. This is my production monitoring, or my load test. Inside the load test, we do give you some details so that you can see what the ramp looked like, what my applications were, and how those applications performed over time. We're going to come back to this because you see here that I have Zoom in here. And if I wanted to look at performance of Zoom over time, now this is just one user, I can load this up with 1, 10, 100, 1,000 users, depending on my building block in VDI. And then we'll talk a little bit about strategy, how I would go about testing this, and I'll use a real use case to talk about how we went about answering this question from the outside in as well as from the inside out. So you'll get a little bit of testing strategy for this Office UC capacity use case that we're going to talk about. And then finally, what a test looks like. So here I have 2 continuous tests. They will run on a schedule every 5 minutes, and they will run through a transaction on my IGEL endpoint. And so for my remote worker performance, I've configured that to go against my target environment. This is just an RDS environment that I set up. It's not WVD, but it is in Azure. I have a group of accounts that I can use to work against that environment, as well as N+1 launchers to throw as much load as I want, to randomize it as much as I want. One of the nice things about a continuous test is that if I place my launchers geographically, I can represent those geographical launchers on a map, and I'll show you that as well. And so this gives you kind of a worldview of what's working and what's not working. It's a great use case for, say, a clinic. We have a customer that they have stores, right? So they actually have brick and mortar stores that they want to make sure their systems, their finance systems are online before people show up and open the doors. And actually our latest use case is probably a top 5 airline, and they're staffed really well in airports that are big, Heathrow, etc. But when you get to the small regional airports, Bangor, Maine, Gatwick, these kind of things, they don't have staff till just before that flight's ready to go out the door. So what they wanted is they wanted what they call their crack of dawn test. So as the sun is rising, they schedule these tests to go out and tell them all systems are up with enough time to dispatch a technician if they would need to, if they have a problem in one particular geolocation. Once I configure the basics, we get to schedule it. This is scheduled for every 30 minutes. Let's drop that down to every 3 minutes. And then here's the steps that I'm going to run through. I have some recorded notepad interactions. This could be Office. This could be any application. We have 20 or 30 pre-configured applications, including Epic, Bloomberg, several other applications that are common to those industry verticals, as well as we have a knowledge worker, which is Office suites. I have workloads for Zoom, for Slack. So we have a ton of workloads that help save you time, that allow you to just customize a few areas. Instead of clicking this button, I want to click that button. Instead of this username, I want to use that username, and you're off to the races. So we really try to make the platform quick to start up and quick to get moving. I've stacked these. Our next version releases at the end of next month, and it will include the ability to move back and forth between these applications, right? So you can do it today. You have to do it through a code view. The next version will let you do it through the UI. You can say, open this, keep it running, and it will open Outlook, type a message, attach a Word file, send that off, copy the link, put it in the Slack, and interact in between those applications. And you can declare those interactions much easier through the UI in our next version. As I pull these applications in, I can decide, do I want notifications based on those applications? So I have Paint as an example, and I've declared measurements, saving a file. I want saving a file to happen within 7 seconds. And this will get reported back to me as this runs. If that threshold is exceeded, it can send me an email, or I can just pull the data out of the platform itself. We do have a RESTful API, so pushing data in, pulling data out is quite easy. And the appliance ships with a Swagger UI on it. So getting used to using that API with examples, try now, is built into the appliance as well. We can see here under launchers that I have my IGEL launcher is running and ready to go. Let's go ahead and kick off a test. In this remote performance worker, it's going to send the command to my laptop, IGEL endpoint running in VirtualBox. This will connect back into some remote environment and start a user session. Once that user session starts, I'll run a workflow inside that user session, and we'll watch it happen right here.
That's the, let's say, spooky part, right? Because everything is happening more or less automatically, and just have to watch it and simulate your own work. So it's a little bit surprising at the beginning when I went through the test.
Yeah, it is a little spooky. There's a song about it, right? I always feel like somebody's watching me. We do create a banner across the bottom. So if anyone shadows this or connects to this and sees that banner, this is a system that is being used for testing. You'll see at the bottom that we have 4 actions scheduled. The first of 4 is running now. I can repeat it as many times as I want just to kind of loop. The typing is slow because I told it to be slow, right? So when we do the typing, we can set how fast we want that typing to be. I think I set this to write the whole thing with a delay of 300 milliseconds between each character, and that's, of course, customizable. There was my save file event, and we'll move on to the next application. So we're going to let that run in the background. This is, again, my VirtualBox instance of IGEL OS 11, configured as an endpoint, but also as a launcher, running the test. And while this runs, we can go ahead and look at the Login Enterprise side, and I'll bring up UMS so you can see what the launcher configuration looks like. If I go back to my dashboard, I can see my test is running. Remote worker performance. We track several pieces of information, including login performance, login failures, so no failures, and latency. So how long is it taking that client to go ahead and log in? What is that latency between the initialization of the session through the protocol to the settling of the desktop? So we're moving pretty fast here. There's no latency that's being reported by the client itself. Down here, you see my applications are being tested. If I have an issue, I will see a blemish here on this timeline. I'll see a red dot. When I get one of those, and I think if I look, I have one. Just going to move the box. There we go. So here you see that world view. I can zoom in, and I think it will let me go ahead and mouse over and drill into anything that has an issue. And then you do have the ability to change the time span. And I think I have intentionally left a problem in my time span an hour ago. No, on a different test. You'll get a red dot. What's nice about that is we give you the error. We give you the user that had the error, and I actually take a screenshot of the error so that you can see what happened when the test failed. If I had more than one location, I could switch between locations and look at a difference between East Coast, West Coast. This is meant to monitor in production. And again, the idea is that if you've done your acceptance testing and you've done your load testing, then why not use that same test and follow that application into production? And so again, this is actually running from this endpoint through the internet to Oregon, I think is where I have this server. And it could just as easily be East Coast, West Coast, etc. We do this internally at Login VSI we use dynamic CRM. And so we can tell you that instance is out of Western Europe. So East Coast US performance is pretty good. West Coast US, not so much. Again, the application's the same. The where that application is tested from and that performance matters. So I'll pause there. And do we have any questions surrounding?
No, we are all good, Michael.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. So let's take a look at UMS. So here is my UMS. We do have a profile for Login VSI, and the profile is really 2 configuration points. we need the name of the appliance that we're pointing at, and that appliance has a secret. And that secret is visible from the appliance itself. So if I went to launchers, we generate a secret key right here. And that's what you need to go ahead and configure. You need this URL, and you need this secret key. You do need one other piece, and that is you need the certificate, right, to load in so that it doesn't give you certificate errors. And we have a knowledge base article on exactly how to grab that certificate. There's a content path that you can grab and download it on your UMS system.
And if I can just interrupt you for a second, Michael,
Yeah, go ahead.
because the certificate authority deployment to an IGEL operating system is sometimes pretty complicated if you're not used to use the Universal Management Suite. So just in case, it's just a perfect handover to a small thing I wanted to mention. We just published, thanks to Doug, 10 or 15 minutes ago, a tutorial, the Tech Tip Tuesday, about how to deploy files to IGEL. So if you're thinking for how to deploy certificate authority to your endpoint, which things you have to check, which format is good to use, please check the Tech Tip Tuesday videos on agilecommunity.com because it will cover exactly that use case. So sorry for interrupting, but it was just fitting perfectly.
Yeah, this is just for your launcher configuration. Absolutely good. But this is just for your launcher configuration. It's just as simple as once you have downloaded that file, you use the file. And the key is to make sure that you tell it that it is the target is SSL certificate. Once it's there, inside the profile, all I need to do is associate it with the device and add this certificate as part of the assigned object, and that launcher is ready to run. The last part of configuring an IGEL endpoint to be a Login VSI launcher is just to have a job. And I just have a job that starts the launcher that I can execute. And of course, I can start it, I can stop it, I can do whatever I want within the run space of UMS. But I just have a job that kicks off that launcher on a regular basis. And so again, it can be scheduled, which is nice. The endpoint doesn't have to be rebooted. You can actually use an endpoint as a testing device, 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. and then stop and let your user use it. You can coexist. It really depends on your environment. But the configuration is quite easy. It's pre-integrated with the IGEL endpoint and ready for use. And we'll see if there's any questions on the UMS portion of it. Silence is golden. Okay. So here we took a look at this remote workspace. I can see now that we have a little bit of data, 9 applications have completed successfully. 0 or above the threshold, which is important. And then our latency is within threshold here. I'm at 1 millisecond, which is great. And then my login failures. So I've had 0 login failures, 0 login performance issues, 0 latency issues, or application issues. One of the benefits of using this capability is that we can actually generate an SLA report based on continuous testing. So here I can add an SLA report based on a test. I can include my measurements, I can save it, and then once that's there, I can go ahead and generate that report. And what it will do is it will generate, there's not a whole lot of data. I'm running a weekly report on something that's been running for about an hour, but you can have this emailed out. And so evidencing to your management that your infrastructure is up, that your users are able to work, and leveraging this fleet of IGEL endpoints to facilitate this is all at your fingertips here. So we'll let that generate. But the idea is that you can absolutely schedule these and have these emailed out to you and then you don't have to keep coming back and pulling them. You get a report. Here's your weekly availability report, and that will dovetail into our next topic, which is load testing. One of the use cases that we talked about was the ability to do some capacity testing. So if I look at this test, again, this is the math of small numbers, so bear with me. I want to log in. I only have configured 5 users in this for the sake of time. I'll space them out 2 minutes apart. I'll run the test for any amount of time I want after to do endurance testing or what have you. I have a list of things that I'm going to run as part of it. I have a simple Zoom test in that mix. Again, I've done this with Slack. I've done this with Teams, although Teams can be a little tricky. There's this new technology, Electron-based applications. They're a Windows shell around a web engine like Chromium. And so they can be a little bit challenging. So if you are tackling those in any product, just be aware that Slack, Zoom, Teams will not behave the same as Outlook, Office, most of your thick client applications, et cetera. They're this interesting hybrid that can be quite a challenge. So if you're doing something with those in any product suite and you're having some challenges, be advised that they are a different animal as they exist today. So here I have this, I'll go ahead and turn this off because I'm going to reuse some of those components. And once that cleans up, I will go ahead and start my load test. So what this load test was designed to do okay, it's clean. What the load test is designed to do, again, is to run a series of Office applications at infrastructure. In a minute, I'll talk about the WVD testing we did for 13 applications inside of Azure. But here, you want to be able to test right next to your environment. So I want to be able to test the RDS host directly. So I take away the network, take away as many variables as I can. If I connect directly to the session host and drive the session host, what are my numbers? I then want to, without moving that launcher, so that's a launcher in the data center, if you will, I want to come back and look at what does it look like as I start going through local brokerage, load balancers, RD brokers, storefront, etc. I want to be as close to that session host as I can and still test from the outside in. So first we're testing inside in, then we test outside in, because what you're going to find is as more services deploy in the cloud, Citrix Cloud, AVS, VMware on Azure, AWS, Google, what have you, and WVD as well, AVD, they've renamed it to Azure Virtual Desktop. The brokerage layer you have little access to. You can't put control up on the brokerage layer. You can't put Lakeside or Liquidware or your other monitoring tools. They do not give you access to their load balancers or their brokers. You only get to control the session hosts. So now what do? Easiest way to answer your question is to go directly to the session host and then go out through the brokerage and calculate your delta, knowing that that is inefficiency in that brokerage tier. It might be network, it might be something else. It may give you good tools to instrument the middle, but they're not going to let you install your tools on their middle. So we have to work around this black box that is the brokerage layer of cloud services, etc. And that's how we would do it. I would test the session host. I would get a kind of a raw number. I would test your brokerage. That's the number that influences my true capacity. And then I want to start testing away from that data center. What does it look outside of the firewall? What does it look East Coast, West Coast, etc.? And we're well oriented to be able to do that. Again, with your fleet of IGEL endpoints, you can easily, mine is running off of my laptop in the East Bay in California. You can run one in South Carolina. You can run one in Egypt, and you can run back at the same application in the same environment, in the same data center, and start answering the questions for your business. How is this going to be when I deploy it to the UK? How is this going to feel to my user who I'm expecting to check in 50 patients an hour, I'm expecting them to be able to pull a X-ray up in 25 seconds. Time is money to almost every business. And so can we measure that time as you move through these different environments? And so the answer, of course, is yes. So now that we know what our capacity looks like, I'll go ahead and just kick off the load test, and we'll see what we get. It's going to run 5 sessions across 4 applications, log users in every 2 minutes. It's going to run 5 minutes after the last user is logged in for a total of 8 minutes. I have 5 accounts running against 1 launcher. My launcher's pretty small. I think it was a bare minimum. So let's see what happens. I confirm the test. I can give myself a test note if I wanted to. Again, this is a load test. This is meant to run against infrastructure and answer capacity questions. So while that ramps up, let's see it on. And again, this is going to look familiar, right? It'll start the engine. As soon as this settles, we'll see a second session be generated, a third session be generated up to the capacity of the launcher. And so here's your second session already. So this is my configuration issue on my side. I didn't add all my users to my session pool. So this will continue to cause us some trouble. But as you can see, it's loading up all these different sessions on your IGEL endpoint. So I'm load testing now with an IGEL endpoint, which is fantastic. And imagine if you have 100, 1,000 of these, what you can do to test geographically every 5 minutes, or to test real load against a lab environment and infrastructure, all by just deploying a profile from UMS out to an endpoint and kicking off a job. Works really well. So we'll let that run. And while that runs, I'm going to bring up a document, and we'll look at that document real quick to see some of what you can see. So again, this is a document that we put together for a customer. Mostly what I wanted to show is the question that we were trying to answer was, can they get 3,000 executive assistants on WVD using 13 applications? And here's the some of their details. They were testing as a baseline from a laptop. We have inside of our configuration, we have an option. I'm doing a test. I support Citrix. I support RDS, Horizon. We also have a custom connector, which I use for custom storefront. I also use it when I have to integrate with MFA, and I've used the custom connector for WVD. But we also have this desktop connector. And what this desktop connector means is I'm not going to use VDI to log in and start a session. Someone's probably already logged in. I'm just going to run the session-based application workflow, grab that data, and report it back to the appliance. So in this report, we used a simple laptop with no VDI login just to run the workload so that we could benchmark what we see in WVD from a user session perspective against what they have today. So if you are non-VDI and you're looking to go to VDI, this is a great way to demonstrate that. If you want to see, hey, I have mine is a Dell laptop, how is that going to look when it's replaced with an IGEL endpoint? We can help you answer that question even before you get to, well, what's it look like at capacity? Then you always have the question, what happens when I turn 1,000 of these things on? What's it going to do? And we can answer that question for you as well. These were the application workloads. 5 or 6 steps inside of Zoom, 4 steps inside of Slack, several different steps inside of Outlook. When you see these steps, I put timers around each and every one of these steps. So I know exactly how long it took from beginning to end of each task inside the application: Chrome, Excel, PowerPoint, Box, and Adobe. what we did is the goal was to test inside of Microsoft. They recommend 3 different server classes with 3 different configurations per class. So do you want an F series, a D series, or an E series? We quickly excluded the E series. Do you want to do smaller 8 CPU machines, medium 16 CPU machines, or big 32 CPU machines? This has to do with threading and cores and how the applications behave, and can they take advantage of 32 cores? Typically, they cannot. And so when we did our testing, the testing was of all 9 of these different options, matrixed out, so 27 different data points, which ones met our performance benchmark, and you'll see that in this report as well. And then based on that, which was the cheapest. So this was all an exercise, used Login Enterprise with our WVD connector to answer these questions. These are different workload timings. So of all those steps, it took 103 seconds to get through 7, 10 steps, what have you. We have the VMware size comparisons by workload. We have performance baselines. The laptop was 24 seconds, a single session inside a WVD, so your session host, 25 seconds. This is very comparable. They actually did a standard deviation from that to do their math. And you can see how close these are by workload in that single session. So with 1 person on a laptop or 1 person inside a WVD, it's within 1 to 10%. Then we get to load, upper limits, lower limits, testing increments, and we can start seeing the difference based on minimal and then fully loaded, right? So to handle 300 users is what their goal was. They needed 16 session hosts, and they were able to keep their numbers very, very close. So having this data going into an infrastructure project where the executive assistants say, I don't want to go to the cloud, it's slow. Well, you're right, it is 0.8 seconds slow. We'll let your manager decide if 0.8 seconds is the reason to pull the plug on going cloud native, right? Here we have empirical data that tells us what the performance is. And again, we benchmarked it against single session, which we know is within 1% of the laptop today. Because we're doing it by transaction, we're finding all of the weird nuances. Oh, Box took a long time, or Slack had a hard time loading, etc. It's different when I'm in the network versus when I'm over a VPN. All this can be captured in this kind of testing as well, if you run those scenarios. So again, this is a bit of an eye chart, but I just wanted to show you the kind of data that we've pulled out answering this question: how will a power user with Zoom and Slack, so 2 different collaboration tools, unified communications and collaboration, and Office, and a few other critical applications to them, how will they be able to perform in this environment? And we were able to generate quite a lot of data, and then finally come up with a recommendation. So here's where we have all performances the same. Now we're just looking at cost. And then final choice and size. We went with an F16S V2. It will handle 18.5 sessions per host comfortably. And although it only uses about 31 gigs per user, the caveat that we put in here is that you still need 9 terabytes, because inside a cloud, that's the only way you get the storage performance is by adding disks, unfortunately. So this is the kind of data that you can pull out, and it will cost them $3.40 per user. I think this is per day. So, and I'll pause there and see if there's any additional questions.
It's already witchcraft in my opinion.
Yeah, AHV connector. What is AHV?
It's an hypervisor from Nutanix.
Oh, yeah. I'll have to check back with you. We do a lot of work with Nutanix. I don't have an answer to that. I can do it through a custom connector for sure. And we'll look and see if I've actually built that connector or not. I think we have it on the roadmap. And I think they were making some changes that we were waiting for before we locked down our code. Same thing with WVD, by the way. We use the WVD web connector. Again, we use that in conjunction with Microsoft. IGEL was smart. They got the Linux version of the RD client, which Microsoft considers 100% stable. The Mac version, 100% stable. The web client, they're calling 90% stable. It won't change a great deal. The Windows client, 50% stable. They expect the Windows client to change quite a bit over the course of the next year. And so we're waiting for that to settle before we make a thick client for it, for that very reason.
Like I said, that's already kind of witchcraft to me. I mean, if I'm thinking about all the data we are gathering manually,
yeah,
and the automatism you can use in your solution, I mean, it's not only sending out some compliments, it's really impressive. Like I said, I would have been such happy to get that solution way earlier in my other companies, because that would have saved so much time.
Yeah. One of the things that we also do for the load testing is if you're load testing once, you're doing okay. Chances are you're going to make a change. You're going to replace hardware, you're going to add disk, you're going to add IOPS or something to an environment, and you're going to need to rebaseline. And so we have a comparison feature inside the product that lets you pick any two tests and compare them against each other. And we try to do a good job of giving you a quick summary as to net gain, net loss, based on this. So my test, of course, because of it stepping on top of the other users failed here, but you can see the app performance for where we got data is 16% less with 5 users than it was with 1 user. And that's to be expected. We do map active sessions as you go through and logins finish. So we give you some nice graphs that show you as much data as you could want. And then you can always export this and create your own visualizations if you wish. And we'll have some additional reporting in future releases as well. I can also just focus on the logins and see what my logins looked like over time. These are small numbers. You can see I leveled off at 1 because I kept running into this a single user session. That was just a bad configuration on my part. But we do tell you the display protocol, how it's running, the loading of the profile, processing of GPOs, as well as your total login time. On top of that, we're also getting all the application details, all the individual steps inside the application and what their timing was as you load up that system. So you can see at 10 users, I'm within threshold. At 15 users, not so much. At 20 users, it's miserable. Let's stay at 15. And then when you replace a piece of hardware, you run the exact same test again to see if you're better or worse. So that's a use case for the capacity. I think the last use case that we had on deck was just the patient check-in. I'll go ahead and start that, and we'll take a look at it. So patient check-in is going to run this open EMR application, and the open EMR application is defined here. And this gets a little technical for those of you that like technical. I've written a custom script specifically to drill in to the application. We have a C# base. The best part about having a C# base is you can include any library you want. C# is a modern coding language, so all of the fancy things you would want to do in the future are available. So asynchronous computing, you want to do true object-oriented programming, if you want to go page objects, what have you. If you want to use NUnit style, or you want to change some other capabilities, it's all there and available to you. If you don't code, this can be a very daunting task. And for that, we have a click recorder that I think is coming out soon. And we have a GUI spy that will let you cut and paste the commands into something like this without having to know how to code. So we have an editor that will allow you to do the workload editing and with almost a drag and drop look and feel. But here it's generally pretty easy to read. I start a timer, load the page. I look for the application, and then I start finding controls inside that application, changing focus, minimize, maximize, click on a button, type a word, etc. Find another control, click it, press enter, open the page. Once the page shows, stop the timer, click another button, etc. So it's a very simple pattern. We find a control, we interact with the control, and I wrap that in timers. So I start a timer, find a control, do something with that control, and then stop the timer. And that is an action inside of a workload script. I can put in custom weights to slow it down. I can put in global weights if I want, etc. So you'll see that it's almost a repeating pattern every time. So it's pretty easy to customize the workloads and get into it. The GUI spy gives you this piece of information, so you don't have to know how to find this, because the editor with the GUI spy will tell you, this is what it is. Do you want to paste it into your document? Yes. So let's take a look and see how that's running. Finally, some failures. All right. So here my VDI side is fine. Right? My login is good. My login performance is good. My latency is good. So getting into the session, no problem. When I look at the actual application, no control was found. And if I move this box, I actually take the screenshot. This is where I'm having the problem. I'm looking for a control that has a different name or something than what I'm finding. And so we caught an error. We took a screenshot. So if this was a crash, we take a screenshot of the application crash and pass back the user that crashed, as well as the error code. Here, so it's the RDS user 2 had the trouble. The application was open in your MAR. I can't find this thing. And then we have some target OS information, resolution, etc., protocol. I do get a full log file, and it is verbose. But that way you can capture the event and get that onto your application developer, say, hey, what's going on? Did you make a change and not tell us? It wasn't in the release notes. I need to know what that change was so we can accommodate it for our users. And in this way, this will run that test MRS patient check-in. I can have a test from any one of my regional affiliates. So this, again, I can do that up on, I have a medical office on the border of Montana and Canada. As you can imagine, not much IT staff there. We have an office over in Maine. I can test it from there. I can test it from the border of Texas if I wanted. I could test it from Nevada because I like to gamble, etc. Right? So again, I'll pause and cover any questions. This is the Login Enterprise Platform. This is what you can do with it. If you have IGEL endpoints deployed, you have a big piece of the puzzle solved and can really leverage some capability and some capacity and increase the value of testing in your environment as well as your IGEL endpoints. They're so versatile.
That's perfect.
Doug,
Thank you very
Sebastien,
much.
questions or anything
No,
that you
to
want
be
me to drill
honest, no questions, not at all. We covered all of them. I also had an eye on the chat, which was pretty calm today, so that's a good sign. I already had the chance to play around with that, but even if I'm looking about your presentation, I learned a lot of new stuff that I wasn't aware of how to use it, especially this click scripting tool is really helping me in, let's say, non-standard applications. And that's definitely a game changer for us. So I must say I was pretty impressed about the report that went out of your tool, and I would say that we covered more or less every use case we discussed in prior, not more or less, we covered them, thanks to you. So from my side, we are all good. There's maybe one question coming up. There's just a hello from Egypt from Camis. So let's see if there is a question behind coming up. But in the meantime, I can just say thank you very much. Can you maybe share just a few insight about the licensing model in a couple of seconds, because we are just a little bit over time already?
Yeah. Real quick, I just wanted that we do have a page that shows all of the community contributed applications: Epic, SAP, Facets, Office 365, Salesforce, Teams, Zoom, Slack, etc. So we do have a lot of information in there. We have some additional tooling as well. We have a tool that will scan your workspace image, find those applications, and create smoke tests for them in our product, again, as a way to speed through this process, as well as a few other just nice to haves, right? Little extras that our services guys have put together over time. We license per user. So effectively, your IGEL endpoint licensing would probably be similar to our licensing. It just goes against your VDI environment and covers all testing, all use cases across that. They do some, of course, tiered pricing, as well as if you're only testing 2 or 3 applications, that is a factor in pricing discussions as well. You can have as many appliances deployed in as many areas as you like. They're all included in your license. So if you have a disconnected lab that you need to drop a Login enterprise appliance into for testing in an isolated network, that works. If you want to have one inside and outside the DMZ, that works. It really depends on your deployment scenario.
Perfect.
All right.
That's all from my side. Thank you very much, Michael, for your time, for your patience.
Yeah, I appreciate the time. If anyone has any questions, get in contact with Sebastien. He will be more than happy to either put you in touch with me or send it over through him to me and get you some answers.
And if there was something coming up in Slack and the Agile community, I would definitely come up to you, Michael, and send over to you the feedback we received. Douglas, something to add at the end of the session?
No, I thought that was wonderful. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Michael, thank you very much for a great session. Sebastien, thank you much for hosting it and all you do all the time. And I thought it was wonderful, absolutely. And I'm always impressed by Login VSI. And it's really changed a lot over the years, too. So, you know, if you thought you knew Login VSI from, a few years ago, you probably learned something today. So I thought that's really amazing, too. It's a great product.
Perfect. Then I would say we are done. Thank you very much, guys. And wish you a nice evening and a nice day.
Have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. And thank you, Michael. And thank you, Sebastien.
Cheers.
Cheers.